Tonight I want us to look at more about creeds in the study of denominationalism. When we talk about creeds, we're talking about a confession of faith or a statement of faith that's an authoritative formulation of the beliefs of a religious community. This is the Encyclopedia Britannica's definition of it. And so when we're looking at it, we're looking at something that's stating what we believe as a group, and it's authoritative. Now, I guess it's fine to say that the Bible, the whole thing, is our creed, but that's not really a useful term to apply to the Bible, because generally creeds are talking about what we believe the Bible teaches in the sense that it's generally used. But when we talk about how creeds may creep into the Church of God, not the denomination called that, but God's church, when we look at that, of course it can't be that the church as a whole has a creed. But it can be that as individuals or as groups of people, perhaps local congregations, we can start thinking in that way, in certain ways, even though we may say we have no creed, and we may know creeds are bad, we may not realize some of the ways that we think may be sort of along the same lines. The first way that I want us to look at tonight is how we could express a reliance on the church to determine what we believe. You'll see this or hear this, I think mostly with newer Christians or just immature Christians, even if they've been Christians for a while. But you'll hear certain questions sometimes. You know, what does the Church of Christ teach about something? Well, the church as a whole doesn't teach anything, right? Individual Christians teach, and I guess if you say, well, we're all part of the church and doing the work as the body of Christ, well, we teach what the head tells us to teach, or we're not behaving as the church. You know, we teach the Bible. But there is no particular thing that we can say every Christian teaches this, other than things that are just extremely clear in the scriptures that you have to teach it this way in order to be a faithful Christian. There's disagreements among brethren about a great many things, but there are some things that are absolutely essential to understand. They're clear in the scriptures, and it would be rebellious, really, to teach anything different. People ask, does the Church of Christ believe something? Well, the church, what do you mean by the church believing something? Are you asking what's the official statement of faith? Are you asking what the creed is? We need to look at the Bible. That's the only way to determine what the church believes. People who are in the church may not believe this because they may not have been taught it yet. They may not have studied it yet. They may have a misunderstanding. But so we can't say everybody who's a member of the church believes this. But we need to recognize that we can't really make a statement of faith about what the church believes other than we believe in Christ and what he tells us in the scriptures. You know, when people ask, what's the practice of the church about this thing? What does the church do about the Lord's Supper in this situation or whatever? Well, what do the scriptures say? If it may be that people have many different views about what we're to do in that situation based on their study of the scriptures. How does the church view this? Well, have they decided what we believe about that yet? That may be a little bit rarer to hear, but my grandfather heard something like that. He can't remember the topic, but a lady once asked, well, haven't they decided about that yet? And of course, his question to her was, well, who is they? Who gets to decide about what the scriptures teach on any particular topic? We as individuals have to make that decision for ourselves as we study the scriptures. And so we can get into this way of thinking about things, and kind of, it's not a creed. We're not really talking about creeds, but it has sort of the same impact, that we're relying on the church, whatever we think that means, to tell us what to believe, rather than on Christ to tell us what to believe, on these inspired scriptures that are a mirror to correct us and change us. We don't have to rely on the church to make a decision about what the scriptures say. They say what they say, and we need to study them. They may ask us, what do you believe and why? Can you show me in the scriptures? That's fine. But we can't just say the church has decided this, the church teaches this, the church, practices this, unless we're making that statement based on what any faithful church has to do because of what Christ has taught in the scriptures. Some church websites or tracts, other printed material, can contain statements of faith. When we talk about a statement of faith, we're saying, what do we believe? And, I'm not saying it's wrong to have something like that, to say what a local congregation believes. Because if you're talking about fundamental things that are especially different from what other people are teaching, what the false teachers are teaching, and you're saying, if you come here, here's what you're going to find. I don't believe that's wrong, but there are certain ways of dealing with it that really become almost creeds. I found an example on one church's website where they actually quoted from an old famous preacher, Bastel Barrett Baxter, and the title of the article is, "Who are the Churches of Christ and What Do They Believe?" Well, just the title has a bit of a problem. But, there's a bunch of questions and then answers as you go through it. And one of them is, how are the churches organizationally connected? And mostly he doesn't even use scriptures here. He just makes statements talking about churches of Christ are autonomous and all of that. But then he says congregations do cooperate voluntarily in supporting the orphans and the aged, in preaching the gospel in new fields, and in other similar works. Oh, so now are we saying that all churches of Christ believe that? That you have to believe that churches are allowed to cooperate together in this type of work, even though it's not found in the scriptures anywhere? You see, this is a problem with statements of faith like this. Like, this is what churches of Christ believe. Well, I don't believe that. And yet I believe I'm a member of a church that belongs to Christ. Does that mean that I'm not because I don't agree with this statement of faith? Well, no, he's just wrong. Other questions on there are, what does the Church of Christ believe about the Bible? Do members of the Churches of Christ believe in the virgin birth? Does the Church of Christ believe in predestination? Well, that's just the wording of the questions has a problem. He's trying to make a statement of what every member of the Lord's church has to believe about all of these things. And that's not valid. You don't get to decide. The Bible tells us what to believe about these things, and we can make articles about it to argue our points, but to say the Church of Christ believes this is really kind of a denominational way of thinking. Of course, you find that denominational concept in this cooperation in these various things that he wants to have as well. I found another one on another church's website, which was interesting. It seems like they were talking about the true gospel and things like that. But yet they were organized in kind of a denominational way, it looked like. It was 3 different churches combined into one somehow. It was very strange, but they had an article of what we believe, and I think they took some of it out of the article by Bastel Barrett Baxter as well. They had, what does the Church of Christ believe about the Bible? Why does the Church of Christ baptize only by immersion? Of course, the answer to that is it doesn't. The church doesn't baptize anybody. People baptize people. The church baptizes nobody. You'll never find the teaching in the scriptures of the church baptizing. That's a denominational concept. Does the Church of Christ have a creed? Well, they say no. The Bible is considered the only infallible guide to heaven, which is great. And yet, in the statement of faith, they're wording it as if it were a creed, basically. So we need to be careful with this type of statement, that we're not trying to make a statement of what every Christian everywhere and for all time believes about anything, unless we're just stating what is clearly taught in the scriptures, and yet we'd have to talk about everything there, wouldn't we? It's much easier to just talk about, here are the things that you'll find that we believe that are fundamental, very easy to understand. Here's what the gospel is. Here's what here's what the scriptures teach about God, and not just make a statement about it, but actually show from the scriptures that that is true, that that's what Christ says, not what the church says. All right. Another area in which we need to be careful, related somewhat to the idea of creeds, is commonly used expressions that are not from the Bible directly. They may not be wrong, but they are not taken from the Bible, and yet you'll find preachers especially, all over the world perhaps, using these exact same expressions. One example that is easy to notice is, speak where the Bible speaks and be silent where the Bible is silent. I believe this is credited originally to Thomas Campbell, the father of Alexander Campbell, I think. I might be wrong. But somewhere around there is generally where I think this statement comes from. And it's been repeated by many, many preachers over the years and still today. And it's a good statement as far as it speaks the truth. But we don't know that it's truth from that statement. It can be very easy to just know that that's the Church of Christ doctrine, right? That's our faith. That's a statement of faith for the church. Speak where the Bible speaks and be silent where the Bible is silent. No, that statement on its own is worthless. We need to establish it from the scriptures themselves. Deuteronomy 29, verse 29, says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. And of course, we find the concept all through the scriptures of just relying on the word of God, not going beyond it, and all of that. And so it's a correct statement. It's not wrong to say it. I don't want to say that if you hear a preacher use that, they're being denominational. Not at all. But I just want us to think about it. Why are we saying it? Why are we making that statement? Do we think of it as this is what our church doctrine is? Or are we saying it because we believe it's a true statement of the ideas expressed in the scriptures? Another idea common expression that's often used, it's not as common, I don't think, but you can't be taught wrong and baptized right. Well, that's true. Acts 19, Colossians 2:12, 1 Peter 3:21, they all show that baptism relies on faith and understanding for it to be effective in any way. You can't be taught wrong and baptized right. It's true. But we need to make sure that we're not just making that statement, quoting that line and saying, well, that's our doctrine. You can't be taught wrong and baptized right. We need to understand deeply from the scriptures why that's true and communicate that to others. Even the statement, we have no creeds but the Bible. Well, that's true. That's good. But we need to be able to explain why, right, from the scriptures. We can't just say it because, well, that's the Church of Christ way. We have no creed but the Bible. Well, that's essentially thinking of that as part of our creed, right? It's kind of an oxymoron in that way, or can be, depending on how the individual thinks about it that's saying it. It's not wrong to say it. I'm not saying you should judge other people for saying it. I'm just saying when you say it, or if you say it, think about why. How do you think about it? Do you have a deep understanding of why, or are you just repeating something as if it is part of our creed in some way? We can also think about the way we teach certain topics as almost being part of our creed, because they're kind of taught the same way over and over all over the world. An example would be the 5 steps to salvation. I think most Christians that I know can list those out, 5 steps of salvation. They've heard that lesson, right? And yet the Bible, of course, never talks about these as steps of salvation. I'm not saying it's wrong to teach it this way. It can be very convenient and helpful for memorization and to understand certain things that the scriptures teach that we don't want to leave out when we're teaching someone the gospel. But we have to have a much deeper understanding of God's plan for salvation than just a list. And when we call them steps, it can mislead some people into thinking that each thing is a one-time action. You step here, then you step to the next thing. The only one-time action is baptism. Faith has to be the basis of everything we do throughout our whole lives. Repentance has to continue throughout our lives. Confession as well. Those are not just steps. They're not a one-time thing. And sometimes I think we can mislead people by teaching it in this way, especially if we're teaching it this way just because we've heard it taught this way, and we're not really putting an effort into explaining things in a deeper way, the scriptural way. So just because you can list these things out doesn't mean that you understand the gospel. The gospel is much deeper than the list, and we need to make sure we understand that and not just be able to list 5 steps to salvation. Think about how you teach that. Are you doing it because that's the way the church teaches it? Or are you doing it because it's a useful tool to help in communicating something much deeper? One other example along the lines of how we teach things is how we teach about authority. We even have an acronym, CENI, C-E-N-I, which stands for command, example, necessary inference. And look, it's correct. It's a helpful way of understanding authority. It's a good framework for understanding anything. It's not just about the Bible, and it's not a unique way to the church, right? It's not developed by the church. It may have been developed by a preacher at some point. I don't know if anyone else teaches it exactly in that terminology. I don't know. But I know other people who just teach about logic and understanding reading. They basically are going to use these same ideas in what they're explaining. How do you establish authority, even with law, with the government and things like that? You'll find these same ideas present. But it can be easily taught like it's our particular teaching. It's what gospel preachers must teach it this way. And yet the Bible doesn't teach it that way. So if you teach the same concept in a different way that is more helpful for your audience, that's even better. You don't have to teach it in a particular way. As long as everybody understands how we reason, how we establish authority in anything. It's just common sense, but of course people like to throw out common sense when they look at the Bible, unfortunately. So we have to teach about it, but we don't have to teach about it in exactly this way, using this acronym, using this system. It's helpful. It's not wrong to use it, but it may be more helpful to teach it slightly differently depending on your audience. And don't do it just because you think that's how it's supposed to be taught in the church. Christ didn't tell us to teach it that way. We have no creed to tell us to do that. You don't have to teach it like that. So in conclusion, individual Christians or groups of Christians can display possibly a creedal way of thinking in various ways by expressing reliance on the church to determine what we believe, by making statements of faith on our websites or printed material like tracts or something like that that are worded in a way that really looks like they're trying to say what the church believes. And there's commonly used expressions that are not from the Bible that we may be using simply because we hear it and we repeat it rather than really deeply understanding it. And even the way that we teach certain topics can be, because it's commonly done all over the world, it could be seen as kind of part of our creeds. And so we need to be careful with those things. Watch our own thinking and why we say what we say. Don't judge other people who are saying these things. It's not wrong, unless they're actually, saying things that are wrong. But let's watch ourselves and our thinking that we really don't have any creed. Thank you.